Action. So it's hard to believe, Craig, but it's been 20 years later this year, 2025, since we first started WeGo. So the social media at WeGo have deemed that we should sit down and yak about it a little bit for social media purposes and for posterity. So,
and I think it's also quite fitting to explain to everyone that when we first met through our mutual friend, you didn't want to work full time. You wanted to just invest, and I managed to convince you to join us as a full-time employee. I was full-time co-founder, and it's been the longest career that you've had with one company, and you've gone from product into the leadership role.
Yeah, so I just come off 6.5 years building products and running engineering teams for Yahoo.
Yeah.
And during that time built, I think, 40 different verticals, and travel was one of them. I particularly liked working on the travel product because spent a lot of time traveling, particularly earlier in my backpacking days. And
from memory, you worked a lot with Yahoo on the business development side with Zuji back in the day.
Correct. Yeah, they were our partner in Southeast Asia. Not that we had a lot to choose from back then.
Actually, that's a good segue into kind of analyzing kind of what's happened in the last 20 years. Because if I think back then, the world was very much territorial. So you had the big meta search players that were based in the US and kind of stayed within their territory, and good opportunity for us to, set up WeGo to cater to Asia Pacific. And a lot of I guess a lot has changed in the last 20 years. From your perspective, because you've played a pivotal role from product into the technology and now into the leadership. What have you seen as the major fundamental changes, like in the online travel space in those 20 years?
All right. Well, I mean, a lot has happened in 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years ago when we were first getting set up, online travel in the Asia Pacific region, which is sort of where we were originally focused, was relatively embryonic. Most travel was still being conducted offline. Steve Jobs hadn't launched the iPhone yet, and Android hadn't been thought up. So it was a very different time and place. I think we saw the sector sort of start in the US, and I think it was pretty obvious that it was going to have a lot of, it was going to take off globally. I think at the time, I think it's fair to say we thought it would happen a lot faster than it actually did.
That's true.
We're looking at the early meta search platforms getting startup, so Sidestep specifically, then Kayak in the US, Skyscanner out of the UK or Scotland, Qunar in China.
Yeah.
I remember we were looking at those and thinking, somebody should bring that model to the rest of the world. Craig and I were both living in Singapore at the time, and there's a bunch of low-cost carriers that were getting set up across the region. It was very hard to, there was no place you could go to actually shop them all at once. So just for my personal convenience, I was thinking, somebody should build this.
That's true. We did.
So a lot of the early inspiration was actually, I'm scratching an itch. It was funny, like I had a list of life after Yahoo business ideas. There's about a dozen different things on the list, and travel meta was one of them. And I must have had a conversation with our mutual friend Nick Gundry, because he knew you were working on something as well. And actually, that's when he sort of connected us.
Yeah, my segue into WeGo was via sort of Intercontinental Hotels, where I sort of see how, as a direct to consumer brand, where they wanted to get direct to the consumer via and sort of almost move away from the OTAs. They were working with Kayak and Sidestep. And back then I was quite naive, thinking that we could launch WeGo into Asia Pacific, not understanding the complexities. And I'm really appreciative that I got to meet you, as a co-founder, where you brought in the product and the sort of the technical skills into the business. I think if it wasn't for Nick Gundry, the outcome would have been very different. It would have been very hard for me to kind of launch WeGo by myself back then.
Yeah, it was an interesting period.
So the other, I guess, if we reminisce on the last 20 years, I mean, how have you found the relationship over the last 20 years?
Well, I think we've been working together longer than many marriages last these days. Right. So I think, we've done well on that front. We started with a tiny team that could fit around a couple of IKEA tables in our little shop house in Boat Quay. Start of 2025, I think we have like 430 40 people worldwide now. We'll probably be closer to 600 by the end of 2025. So, we've the business has changed just a little bit over those years.
But like for me, like when I look at how I've seen you transform, when you joined, the founding team is looking after the product, and then you sort of moved quite quickly, into the managing sort of the technology team as well, and then you sort of took over the leadership role. And so for me to kind of see that your personal transformation, if I think of your sort of personality back then was also quite different, very product, and now you've sort of traversed all facets of the industry, like in terms of the travel industry, but also in terms of managing a big, growing, scalable business. So for me to sort of look at your transformation has been very impressive.
No, thank you.
It has.
Yeah, it was somewhat reluctant initially.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I guess we've all had to learn a few new tricks along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 2025 is going to be a very big year for Wego. Indeed, 2024 was a pretty big year. We grew more than 60% last year. We've got some huge product initiatives that are rolling out later this year, and we've got some new business units that we incubated last year that are now beginning to get some serious traction. And I think the fastest growing, one of the largest online travel businesses in the Middle East. But the wider aspiration is to be the biggest online travel company across emerging markets worldwide. And it's funny, we're just talking about the last 20 years. We've got a plan that goes out for about another 5-10 years that actually should get us there. And along the way, we expect to take the step into the public markets at some point over the next few years, which is going to be exciting and provide us the a platform to do some of the things we want to do with the business. So 2025, it's going to be big.